The sun had not yet climbed high enough to burn away the morning chill when Naomi stepped onto the boardwalk, her shawl drawn tight across her shoulders. Light slanted between the wooden buildings, catching dust motes that hung like ash in the air. The town was already stirring, boots striking the planks, wagon wheels clattering across the hard-packed street. But the sound always shifted when she appeared, thinning to a brittle silence broken only by the creak of doors closing or the hiss of whispers that carried farther than they were meant to. She did not look up. She had long since learned the cruelty in eyes was worse than the cruelty in words. No one wanted her. That truth lived with her like a shadow, a fact as steady as the ground beneath her feet. She had been unwanted by the tribe that left her standing at the edge of the prairie with nothing but a bundle of cloth, unwanted by the settlers who saw in her neither kin nor equal. She existed in the hollow between worlds, surviving on laundry work, sewing jobs, any task that kept her hands too busy for her heart to ache. She reached the water pump, set her tin pail beneath the spout, and began to work the handle. The iron groaned with each stroke, water spilling out sharp and cold, splashing against her wrists. The sting in the cracked skin of her hands was almost welcome. Pain, at least, was honest. As she worked, children's laughter floated down the street. She glanced up in time to see them chasing one another with sticks, their voices bright as birdsong, until one noticed her. The game froze. "Don't let her touch you," a boy cried, his face twisted with mock terror. "She'll turn you into smoke." The others scattered, shrieking with glee, dust rising like ghostly trails in their wake. Naomi looked back to the pump and pressed harder, forcing the water to flow faster. It was then she saw the girl. She was small, perhaps 8 years old, with hair the color wheat braided clumsily down her back, freckles scattered across cheeks flushed from running. Her dress was clean but patched at the hem, her boots too large, scuffing against the dirt. In her hand she clutched a daisy, its stem bent, a single petal missing. She stood just beyond the pump, studying Naomi with a steady, curious gaze untouched by the wariness that lived in the eyes of others. "Hello," the girl said. Her voice trembled slightly but carried, clear as a bell in the morning hush. Naomi froze. Children usually kept their distance, their parents' warnings heavy in their ears. Yet this one stepped closer, lifting the daisy like an offering. For a heartbeat, Naomi thought to turn away, to retreat into the safety of silence. But something in the child's face, earnest, unguarded, held her still. Slowly, as though it might vanish if she moved too quickly, she reached out and accepted the flower. Its weight was slight, yet it settled in her palm like a stone. "What's your name?" the girl asked. Naomi hesitated. A name was dangerous. It made you real easy to wound. But the child's eyes waited, patient and bright. "Naomi," she said at last, her voice quiet as wind through grass. The girl's smile bloomed. "I'm Clara." She skipped forward a half step, as if the space between them had already been bridged. From across the street, a woman's voice cracked like a whip. Clara, a laundress, arms burdened with a basket, scowled. "Come away from there." Clara stiffened. For a moment she looked torn, but when Naomi inclined her head in the faintest gesture, the girl obeyed. She ran, her two big boots dragging in the dust, her braid bouncing. Naomi stared at the daisy in her hand until the petals blurred, then tucked it carefully into her shawl. By afternoon, the whispers had grown sharper. At the well, Naomi heard them in the cadence of voices lowered yet meant to be overheard. That girl should be kept away from her. Bad blood. Imagine the shame. Mark my words. Nothing good comes from mixing with the likes of her. The words slid around Naomi like knives, but she kept drawing water. To respond was confirm their power. Yet Clara returned. The next day she came carrying a scrap of paper marked with crayon lines, 3 stick figures beneath a crooked sun. She thrust it out proudly. "This is you," she explained, pointing at the tallest figure. Naomi could not speak. She traced a wobbled outline with a fingertip, careful not to smudge the colors. She folded the paper with care, as though it were silk, and slipped it into her shawl beside the daisy. After that, Clara came often. Sometimes she brought tokens, a button, a wooden horse worn smooth, another flower rescued from the roadside. Sometimes she brought only herself, slipping close when no one watched. Naeli found herself mending the girl's torn dress, braiding her hair while Clara hummed tuneless songs. In the quiet of those small gestures, something long buried stirred within Naeli, a tenderness she had thought lost forever. But the town saw, and the town judged. One Sunday at church, Clara slid onto the bench beside Naeli. The room shifted at once. Mothers drew their children away, skirts rustling, whispers hissing like snakes. The preacher faltered mid-verse before continuing in a louder voice, as though volume might blot out the sight. Naeli felt her cheeks burn, shame clawing at her throat. She wanted to rise, to flee, to spare Clara from the weight of her scorn. But then Clara's small hand pressed into hers beneath the bench, warm and steady. Naeli stayed. From the back pew, Thomas Whitlow watched. His face was a map of grief, lines carved deep around his eyes. A rancher by trade, widowed 3 winters past, he lived now for his daughter alone. He had warned her against straying too near the woman the town scorned. Yet Clara disobeyed with quiet boldness that unsettled him. He saw how she returned from those visits brighter, lighter, laughter spilling from her lips like water released from a dam. And though fear urged him to forbid it again, another part of him, quieter, heavier, kept still. For he recognized something in Naeli's silence, a loneliness that mirrored his own. The storm came without warning. Clouds gathered, thick and black, until the sky split with thunder that rattled windows. Rain lashed the rooftops, flooding the street in rivulets that swirled with dirt. People bolted doors, shouted warnings. In the chaos, Clara vanished. Thomas's voice carried above the storm, raw with panic as he shouted his daughter's name. Neighbors fanned out, lanterns bobbing, their lights smothered by sheets of rain. Naeli's heart pounded. She knew without knowing how that the girl had gone toward the creek. She ran, her shawl whipping in the wind, mud sucking at her boots with every step. The creek had swollen to a torrent, waters churning wild and brown. And there, clinging desperately to a half-submerged log, was Clara. Her small figure shuddered with cold, her eyes wide with terror. The current tore at her, threatening to drag her under. Naeli waded in. The water bit like ice, rising to her waist, dragging at her legs with merciless strength. She stumbled once, caught herself, pressed forward. Rain stung her eyes, lightning split the sky in jagged flashes. Clara's cry reached her, thin but piercing, and she surged on, arms outstretched. Her fingers brushed fabric, slipped, caught again. With a desperate pull, she gathered the girl against her chest, holding her close as the current fought to tear them apart. The journey back was agony, each step a battle, her strength bleeding away. But the sight of Clara's pale face, her trembling lips, drove her on. At last she stumbled onto the bank, collapsing to her knees with the child still clutched in her arms. The townsfolk were there, their lanterns casting halos of light through the storm. They stared in silence. Struck dumb by the sight of the woman, they scorned carrying the girl they cherished. Thomas stood among them, hat dripping, eyes locked on Naeli with a look she could not read. Fear, awe, something deeper. Clara stirred, her voice weak but certain as she whispered against Naeli's shoulder. "Could you be my mother?" The words fell into the hush like a stone into still water, ripples spreading through every listening heart. Naeli froze. Around her, the townsfolk held their breath, the storm easing into silence as if the sky itself awaited her answer. And in that suspended moment, Naeli, who had believed all her life that nobody wanted her, felt the world tilt, the ground shift, as if the future had cracked open at her feet.